Chapter 1. The Call from Heaven, 1095. You are a peasant, born to mud and silence. Your fingers are calloused from years spent grasping a wooden plough behind a wheezing ox, turning the frozen soil of northern France. The wind bites through your patched tunic as you kneel beside the hearth at night, praying to saints whose names you barely remember. You've never seen the sea. You've never ridden a horse. You cannot read the Latin carved into the stones of the church in your village. But you know this: life is suffering and heaven is the only escape, until one day everything changes. It is late autumn in the year of our Lord 1095. A messenger comes to your village, ragged, wide-eyed, shouting that the Pope himself is coming to Clermont. Pope Urban II, a man of Rome, the vicar of Christ. You have heard his name whispered by the priests, spoken with awe. Now he calls upon the people, all the people, even you. You leave your thatched hut behind. For days you walk following the others, men with nothing but hope, women dragging carts, children clinging to their sides. The road winds through forests and fields, towns and ruins, until you reach Clermont. There, amid banners and bells, thousands gather in the chill air. You see him, Pope Urban, standing on a wooden platform, clad in white and gold, a crozier in one hand, his voice ringing like a blade drawn from its sheath. The crowd falls into silence. You strain to hear. You taste the moment in your lungs. "O most valiant soldiers and sons of God," he begins, "you who seek redemption, you who are burdened by sin, know this. Our brethren in the east suffer grievously at the hands of the infidels." He speaks of Jerusalem, the Holy Sepulchre, Christ's tombs defiled, of Christian pilgrims slaughtered by Turks, of the Byzantine Empire calling for help. And then his voice grows fierce. "Take up the cross, drive out the enemies of God, let the love of Christ burn in your hearts like a holy fire." His arm rises. God wills it. A shout erupts, then another, until the hill trembles with the roar, "Deus vult, Deus vult, Deus vult." You join in, the words exploding from your chest like a hymn and a war cry. You are no longer a serf. You are a soldier of Christ. That night, beneath the stars, you kneel and let the village priest sew a red cross onto your tunic. It is not just a symbol, it is a promise. A mark that says your soul is now pledged to God's war. You feel taller, stronger, holy. You sell your tools. You give your goat to a neighbor. You kiss your mother goodbye. There are tears in her eyes, but pride too. You are going to Jerusalem. You have no armor, no sword, but you are not alone. Thousands like you rise from the fields and towns, answering the call. They call it the People's Crusade. Led not by nobles, but by firebrands. The most famous is Peter the Hermit, a wiry man with wild eyes and a voice that moves crowds like wind through wheat. He carries a letter, he says, from heaven. "And a donkey. Follow me," he cries in every village. "The Lord has opened the way. The waters of the Danube will part for us like the Red Sea for Moses." You believe him. You believe everything. And so you march. The road east is longer than you imagined. Rivers, forests, mountains. Hunger walks beside you, whispering in your ear. Some nights you sleep in barns, others under the sky. Your feet bleed, your companions die, disease, wolves, bandits. But more join along the way, a tide of faith rolling eastward. Not all are true pilgrims, some are thugs, thieves, drunks. They wear the cross, but their hearts are black. In towns along the Rhine, you see blood spilled, not of Muslims, but of Jews. Entire communities massacred, burned, slaughtered in the name of Christ. You ask yourself, is this God's work? The priests say yes. That God's enemies wear many faces. You cross into the lands of the Byzantines. Eastern Christians, strange and soft-spoken, dressed in silks with incense-filled churches and jeweled icons. You thought they would welcome you. But they stare at your mob with suspicion. Emperor Alexios does not greet you as brothers. He sees in your horde a threat. He fears what you might become, and he is right to fear. The People's Crusade is chaos. With no discipline, no supplies, and no plan, the multitude splinters. You follow Peter across the Bosporus into Asia Minor, toward the land of the Turks. It is a trap. At Sivatot, you are surrounded. The Seljuk cavalry comes with the dawn, fast, terrible, silent, until the arrows fall like rain. There is no defense, no order. Men scream, horses bolt. You run, stumbling over corpses until the dust swallows the sunlight. When you wake, you are alone. Months pass. The survivors trickle back across the straits. Peter returns to Constantinople in disgrace. He says nothing. His voice is gone. You beg at the gates of the city, thin as a branch, your cross faded and stained. Is this what God willed? Then one day you hear horns. A new army has arrived. Not barefoot peasants, but knights, real ones, plate and mail, banners and squires. They come in waves. Raymond of Toulouse, Bohemond of Taranto, Godfrey of Bouillon. Princes with armies, priests with relics, discipline and purpose. The real crusade has begun. You are nothing next to them, but you are still here. You still bear the cross and Jerusalem still calls. You swear you will reach it, even if you must crawl, even if your bones must pave the road. Chapter 2, Princes of War, 1096 and 1097. You stand at the edge of a world divided. Behind you lie the shattered remnants of the People's Crusade, broken carts, shallow graves, whispers of defeat. Ahead, a thunderstorm of steel and faith marches eastward. The Prince's Crusade, a tide unlike anything seen since the fall of Rome. You are not one of them, not truly, but you attach yourself to their shadow. A squire to a lesser knight. Cook, a porter, a ragged remnant of a dream. Still you bear the red cross stitched to your chest, and you move with the army of God. They come from every corner of Christendom. Bohemond, the Norman wolf of Taranto, brings his mercenary host. Lean men with cruel eyes. Raymond of Toulouse marches with the oriflamme of St. Peter, his banner bright beneath the sun. Godfrey of Bouillon, tall as a tree, carries the weight of piety like a sword. Each prince is proud. Each claims to be the true leader of this holy host. Alliances shift like sand, but all bow, however reluctantly, to the authority of Emperor Alexios. The city of Constantinople looms like a jewel, domes of gold, walls like mountains. You cross the Bosporus again, this time under truce. This time you carry a purpose. Alexios demands oaths, fealty, promises. The Crusaders bristle, but hunger for his gold and ships binds their tongues. In secret, they plot to carve their own kingdoms from the lands they are sworn to protect. The Emperor sends guides, maps, supplies. The real war is about to begin. Asia Minor, a land scorched by sun and swords. You march under blazing skies across plains dotted with ruins and blood. At Dorylaeum the Turks strike. Kilij Arslan, Sultan of the Seljuks, rides at the head of a phantom army. Horse archers like ghosts, they strike, vanish, strike again. The vanguard of the Crusader host nearly breaks. You are in the rear, but the terror reaches you like a fever. Screams, smoke, cries to saints and mothers. The sky fills with arrows. You see knights fall, their armor no shield against fire and fury. But the princes rally, reinforcements charge, steel crashes against bone. The Turkish line breaks. You survive. Again. They call it a miracle. After Dorylaeum, the Crusader host pushes deeper. Cities fall. Nicaea is besieged, high walls, brave defenders. The Byzantines demand its return, and the Crusaders grit their teeth and hand it over. Suspicion grows. Still, you march. Toward Antioch, toward destiny, toward Jerusalem, still far. Beyond the mountains and deserts of Syria. But you do not turn back. You are part of this army now. You have seen death, fire, betrayal. But still you believe. You are a crusader. Chapter 2. The Spark of Faith and Fire. The First Crusade Unleashed, Expanded Edition. You are in the late 11th century, a time when Europe is stirring from centuries of relative isolation. Castles dot the hillsides, monks labor in candlelit, scriptoria and knights armored and devout dream of eternal glory. Life is brutal and uncertain, but faith is unshakable. And from the heart of this medieval world, you hear a call, one that will ignite the passions of thousands and unleash a storm across the lands of the East. The Papal Summons, Urban II at Clermont. You find yourself in a crowded field outside the town of Clermont in 1095. Pope Urban II stands before a throng of nobles, clergy and commoners. His voice rises over the murmur of the crowd. He speaks of horrors: Christian pilgrims attacked in the Holy Land, the desecration of sacred sites, and the advancing power of the Seljuk Turks, who now threaten the Byzantine Empire. But Urban does not merely appeal to politics. He invokes heaven itself. Deus vult, he cries, God wills it, and the crowd roars in return. You feel the electric surge of emotion, the weight of centuries of Christian devotion channeled into a singular purpose, a crusade to liberate Jerusalem. Urban promises remission of sins to all who take up the cross. You watch as noblemen tear strips from their garments to fashion makeshift crosses, sewing them to their tunics. A holy war has begun, one not for kings, but for God. The People's Crusade, zeal without discipline. Before armies can be raised or strategies devised, the movement takes on a life of its own. You witness the People's Crusade, a wild, uncoordinated surge of peasants, low-ranking knights, monks and women, led by charismatic figures like Peter the Hermit. They march eastward in a frenzy of religious fervor, convinced that divine providence will guide and protect them. But the road is long and the realities of hunger, disease and poor planning take a toll. In the Rhineland, you are horrified as misguided zeal turns inward. Mobs slaughter Jewish communities in an eruption of anti-Semitic violence. As the People's Crusade reaches Byzantine lands, Emperor Alexios III Komnenos, both amused and alarmed, hastily ferries them across the Bosporus into Anatolia. There the Seljuks make short work of the undisciplined mob. The People's Crusade is destroyed almost entirely, a prelude soaked in blood. The princes assemble, a force like no other. Next comes the real crusade. You stand amid the banners of Europe's mightiest lords as they gather: Raymond IV of Toulouse, Bohemond of Taranto, Godfrey of Bouillon, Robert of Normandy, and others. Though ostensibly united by faith, each brings ambition, rivalries, and differing loyalties. You cross into Constantinople with them, a city of grandeur and suspicion. Emperor Alexios demands oaths of fealty and promises support. But trust is scarce. The Crusaders are wary of Byzantine motives, and the Byzantines in turn see the Westerners as uncouth and unpredictable. Into Asia Minor, the trial by fire. As the Crusader army marches into Anatolia, you feel the weight of the challenge. Ahead, the Seljuk Turks know the terrain, strike swiftly and vanish. At the Battle of Dorylaeum in 1097, Bohemond's vanguard is ambushed. You stand among the embattled knights as arrows rain down and chaos swirls. But reinforcements arrive just in time and the Crusaders push forward. The desert sun beats down, water is scarce and morale wavers. Yet city by city they press on. Nicaea falls thanks to Byzantine help. Then comes Antioch, an ordeal that stretches nearly a year. You suffer starvation, disease, and relentless attacks. When the city is finally breached, you are too weak to cheer. But the siege has a twist. The Crusaders become besieged in turn by a Muslim relief army. Miraculously, a peasant claims to find the Holy Lance, the spear that pierced Christ's side, buried in the city. Faith surges anew and the Crusaders break the siege. Jerusalem, the crown of the crusade. Finally, you reach Jerusalem in 1099. The holy city, sacred to three religions, looms before you. You see its golden dome shining in the sunlight, guarded by Fatimid forces. The Crusaders, now gaunt and battle-hardened, build siege towers and prepare for one last push. The attack is fierce and unrelenting. When the walls are breached, the fury is unleashed. You witness scenes of unspeakable violence. Muslim and Jewish inhabitants are slaughtered in the name of God. The Crusaders, overcome by zeal and vengeance, believe they are purifying the city. Blood flows in the streets. Amid the carnage, you also see tears of joy. Pilgrims kneel at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, overcome with awe and gratitude. Godfrey of Bouillon refuses the title of king, calling himself instead the defender of the Holy Sepulchre. The aftermath, glory and guilt. The First Crusade ends in triumph, but its legacy is complex. You walk among the ruins and the survivors, sensing both the pride of victory and the moral scars of what was done. A new kingdom is born, the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and with it, a fragile Christian presence in the East. But tensions remain. The Byzantines feel betrayed. The Muslim world, stunned at first, begins to prepare for vengeance. You leave this chapter with awe and unease. The First Crusade has shown the heights of faith and the depths of violence. It has changed the world, and it is only the beginning. Chapter 3. The Siege of Antioch, 1097 to 1098. You have crossed the mountains of Anatolia and felt your boots melt on the stones of Syria. You have watched men die for water and heard the hymns of the dead echo across empty valleys. But all of it, all the toil, the hunger, the aching steps, was merely prologue. Now you stand before the walls of Antioch. They do not rise, they loom. The walls of Antioch do not simply protect a city. They declare defiance to the world. Miles of ramparts snake over hills and rivers, locked together by 50 towers, each a fortress in itself. The stones are blackened with age, their edges worn from 100 forgotten wars. You arrive in the dying days of October. The wind bites dry and sharp, carrying the stink of burnt fields and the distant clang of iron from the city's heart. You are not the farmer who left Europe barefoot. Not anymore. You have learned the weight of steel. Your hands no longer blister, they scar. You sleep with a blade near your chest and rise with prayers pressed between cracked lips. You are not yet a knight, but you have killed. And you have survived. Antioch is ruled by Yagi Sian, a man of calculation and cruelty, who commands his fortress with the discipline of a lion. Inside the walls, he has food, water, soldiers, and time. Outside, the Crusaders have faith and little else. The siege begins. At first, it feels like a test of endurance, but soon you learn it is a test of the soul. The Crusader army, bloated with hopes and hungers, cannot completely surround the city. The land is broken and vast, and the garrison within strong. The blockade leaks, and winter begins its slow, merciless descent. Food vanishes. You see men eat grass. Some boil the soles of boots, praying for the taste of leather. Every night the winds grow colder. Snow hardens the ground until the dead can no longer be buried. You hear wolves in the distance and wonder if they are circling for flesh or salvation. Despair gnaws at the camp like a beast with infinite teeth. You remember the priest hanging from the tree. Father Renaud, once a voice of comfort, now a frozen carcass swaying in judgment, accused of hoarding food while others starved. A knight is found stealing barley from a dying man's bowl. His sentence is exile. In this frozen land, it is the same as execution. Some break. Peter the Hermit, who once preached with fire, disappears into the hills. His followers scatter. Whole bands of foot soldiers vanish by morning, their camps empty, their tracks buried in snow. But not all falter. Visions spread like wildfire. A priest named Stephen of Valence claims he sees angels walking the camp at night. He swears the saints weep with them and that Christ walks in rags among the starving. He preaches not triumph but endurance, and when you listen, truly listen, you feel something stir in your ribs. Perhaps faith, perhaps madness. Then the turning point, a whisper in the cold. Firuz, an Armenian tower guard inside the city, sends word to Bohemond. He will betray his post for gold. No one asks why. Perhaps it is greed. Perhaps he saw the faces of the starving. Or perhaps he simply grew tired of serving the Seljuks. His reasons are irrelevant. His offer is everything. The plan is audacious. A chosen few will scale the walls under night's cloak, guided by Firuz's rope. If they succeed, the gates will open. If they fail, they die. You volunteer. That night, the moon hides. Clouds swallow the stars. You slip from the trench and creep toward the wall, heart pounding, breath shallow. The rope dangles above, a thread from heaven or a snare from hell. You climb, hand over frozen hand. The air thins. Each step feels like your last. And then, you are there on the wall in the darkness. Firuz's eyes meet yours. No words, only steel. You draw your sword, the watchmen fall. The gate creaks open like a beast stirred from slumber. Bohemond's forces pour through. Steel flashes in the torchlight. Screams pierce the night. Antioch is breached. And then, chaos. You are not a soldier now. You are storm and flame. The city erupts. Turks resist. Civilians scream. The slaughter is total. Blood flows through the alleys, churches burn, children cry, and you, blade in hand, walk streets soaked in death. You try not to look at the faces. You fail, but there is no time for reckoning. News arrives, Kaboga is coming, the Atabeg of Mosul, a warlord with a host of armies at his back, Turks, Arabs, Persians, each riding for vengeance. 50,000, maybe more. And now it is your turn to be trapped. The Crusaders seal the gates, but Antioch is a skeleton. The garrison is depleted, the food gone. Plague spreads in the shadows. Men die of fever before lifting their blades. The princes bicker over who shall rule the ruins. Rumors of retreat slither like snakes. And then, faith digs again. Peter Bartholomew, a peasant turned prophet, claims to have received a vision. The Holy Lance, the very spear that pierced Christ's side, lies beneath the church of St. Peter. He says God revealed its location to him in a dream. At first they laugh, but desperation is fertile soil. Peter leads a digging party. Days pass, no sign, mockery builds. And then on the seventh day, Peter descends into the hole. Hours pass, the crowd waits. Some pray, some whisper, and then he emerges, mud-caked, shivering, holding a rusted spearhead, a miracle or a lie. You do not know. But when the priests raise the lance, the men cheer. When the sun rises, the princes weep. When the psalms rise from ragged throats, something like hope flickers in your chest again. June 28, 1098. The Crusaders march from the ruined gates of Antioch. Kaboga's army stretches across the plain like an iron tide. Their banners glint in the morning light. Their drums thunder. Their cavalry shivers like 1,000 serpents. But you are not afraid. The Holy Lance is raised, the trumpets cry, and you charge. You do not remember the battle clearly. Only fire, screams, steel against steel, and the face of a boy no older than your brother, eyes wide in terror as your blade finds his ribs. Kaboga watches his army unravel, his allies flee, his authority crumbles, and by nightfall, he is gone. You have won. You have defeated an army. Twice your size, you fall to your knees, and yet Antioch is ash. The princes feud. Bohemond claims the city for himself. Others call him a traitor. The Holy Army fractures. Men who bled together now sharpen blades against each other. You look to Jerusalem, still far to the south. The prize, the promise. But tonight you sleep in a city of ghosts. You wonder if God still walks among the tents, but in the morning you rise. You shoulder your pack and you march. Chapter 4, The Lion and the Crescent, the Third Crusade and the Clash of Kings, Expanded Edition. You are in the late 12th century, standing on a world stage shaken by a cataclysmic event, the fall of Jerusalem in 1187. The Christian world reels from the loss. Rumors spread like wildfire. The holy city, once secured with so much blood and sacrifice, has been taken by a man whose name inspires both admiration and dread. Salah ad-Din, the Sultan of Egypt and Syria, known to the West as Saladin, the fall of Jerusalem. A world aflame, you stand among stunned crowds in Europe as news arrives. Jerusalem has fallen. The kingdom of heaven, the heart of Christian hopes in the East, lies under Muslim control once more. The Battle of Hattin in July 1187 was a catastrophe. You hear how the Christian army, led by Guy of Lusignan, marched into the arid hills of Galilee and was annihilated by Saladin's brilliant strategy and unwavering discipline. The true cross, relic of Christ's crucifixion, was captured, an apocalyptic symbol of defeat. Church bells toll in mourning across Europe. Pope Gregory VIII issues the papal bull Audita Tremendi, calling for a new crusade. Monarchs, nobles, and commoners are moved by fury, shame, and renewed zeal. 3 kings answer the call, each mighty in his own right, each destined to carve his name into the annals of history. The 3 kings, Richard, Philip, and Frederick. You first look north to the Holy Roman Empire. Emperor Frederick I Barbarossa, an aged warrior emperor of immense renown, dons the cross. He leads a massive army across the Balkans, determined to redeem Christendom. Yet tragedy strikes. Crossing a river in Anatolia, Frederick drowns. The crusade loses its spine, and most of his army disbands. The dream of an imperial recovery dies beneath the Turkish sun. Then your gaze shifts west. King Philip II of France and King Richard I of England, the Lionheart, set sail for the east. Their journey is fraught with tension. Old rivals in Europe, they bring their animosities to the Holy Land. You watch as they besiege the fortress of Acre, trapped in a hellish stalemate. Disease and heat decimate the camp, but finally in 1191, Acre falls. Philip, his health failing and ambitions turning back to France, returns home. Richard remains. Now the de facto leader of the Crusade, he commands with dazzling charisma and ruthless efficiency. Richard and Saladin, duel of titans. You walk in awe through the battlefields of Arsuf, where in September 1191, Richard's forces confront Saladin's. The clash is monumental. You hear the thunder of hooves, the cry of steel on steel. Richard leads from the front, a colossus in mail and courage. Saladin counters with masterful cavalry maneuvers, testing the Crusaders' resolve. The battle ends in a Christian victory, but not a crushing one. Saladin retreats in good order. The two commanders begin a long and subtle chess match, military, political, and psychological. You hear tales of respect and chivalry. Richard sends his physicians to treat Saladin's ill nephew. Saladin returns captured prisoners unharmed. This is no ordinary war. It is a war between giants. March on Jerusalem, the goal unclaimed. Richard pushes south, capturing Jaffa and fortifying his supply lines. Jerusalem looms ever closer, yet you feel the weight of hesitation. The city is holy, but its capture now seems perilous. Saladin has scorched the surrounding countryside. Water is scarce. Taking Jerusalem might be possible, but holding it, that is another matter. The Crusaders reach within sight of the city's walls but turn back. A second march in 1192 is also aborted. You hear murmurs of frustration, but also understanding. Richard knows that victory is not always measured in bloodshed. He negotiates instead. Treaty and legacy. Truce in the Holy Land in September 1192. Richard and Saladin agree to a truce. Christian pilgrims will be allowed to visit Jerusalem. The Crusaders retain control of a narrow coastal strip, including Acre and Jaffa. It is not the triumph Europe had hoped for, but it is peace of a kind. Richard sails home, his legend sealed, but fate is cruel. Captured by Duke Leopold of Austria, he spends over a year in captivity. Saladin, meanwhile, returns to Damascus, weary and aged beyond his years. He dies in 1193, leaving behind an empire held together by reverence and fear. Reflection. The crusade that changed everything, you stand. Now amid the shifting sands of history, the Third Crusade did not recapture Jerusalem, but it reshaped the idea of the crusade itself. It was no longer a simple holy war, it was a clash of civilizations, of kings, and of ideals. It showcased the heights of chivalry and the depths of political rivalry. You leave this chapter remembering the thunder of hooves at Arsuf, the silent awe before Jerusalem's gates, and the strange, almost poetic dialogue between Richard and Saladin. The crusade is not over, but it will never be the same again. Chapter 5. The Kingdom of Heaven After the Fall, 1099-1100. The gates of Jerusalem no longer resist you. They creak beneath your steps, stained with the memories of the siege, and behind them lies not salvation, but silence. You walk through streets where the stones still drip blood, where echoes of the final battle linger like incense too long burned. You came here seeking absolution. What you find is responsibility. The city has been taken, yes, but now it must be held. You feel it immediately. This conquest is not an end. It is a beginning, a fragile one. The victory has left the Crusader, army exhausted, depleted and rudderless. Brothers in arms now eye each other with suspicion. Spoils must be divided, command clarified. The great question surfaces like a serpent in still water. Who shall rule Jerusalem? The leaders of the crusade convene inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. You stand amid the congregation, the breath of war still hot on your armor. Raymond. of Toulouse is the first to speak. He makes no claim to the throne, yet he does not withdraw either. His reluctance is political theatre, an invitation for others to bid. Then Godfrey of Bouillon, the noble knight of Lower Lorraine, steps forward. He declares he will not wear a crown of gold where Christ wore a crown of thorns. The words ripple through the church. Instead, he takes the title Advocatus Sancti Sepulchri, Defender of the Holy Sepulchre. It is a humble name for an ambitious task. Godfrey is now the de facto ruler of the city. You watch the kneeling soldiers, the Latin priests, the awe in their eyes. But you sense it already. The kingdom of Jerusalem is not built on unity. It is built on dust and papered over with faith. Outside the walls, the world waits to strike. The Fatimids have not surrendered. Word comes swiftly. An Egyptian army is marching north from Ascalon, led by Al-Afdal Shahanshah, the powerful vizier of Cairo. His forces are said to number in the tens of thousands. Their goal is not to reclaim Jerusalem. It is to erase the Crusaders from the map. You've barely had time to bury the dead. There is no rest. You march again, southward, along the coastal plain. The summer is cruel. The sun beats down upon chainmail and cracked leather. Water is scarce, your boots fill with sand. Yet you march, spurred not by hope but by duty. You do not know what awaits at Ascalon, only that to do nothing is to perish. August 11th, 1099. You camp near the city. The Egyptian army lies just ahead, camped in comfort. They believe you are too weak to strike. That assumption will cost them dearly. At dawn, Godfrey leads the assault. The Egyptian lines are caught off guard, still rising from their tents. You charge with the knights of Normandy, Lotharingia, Provence. The clash is total. The dust obscures all vision. You lose sight of your standard, your friends, yourself. The sword in your hand becomes an extension of your heartbeat. You thrust, slash, parry, scream. You see Frankish cavalry split the Egyptian ranks. You hear the Fatimid war drums falter. You push forward, shield heavy with blood. Arrows blacken the sky. Yet you do not retreat. When the sun sets, you still stand. The Egyptians flee, abandoning tents, treasure, horses. Ascalon itself does not fall. It remains in Muslim hands. But the path to Jerusalem is secure. You return to the holy city a survivor again, a guardian. But this time, there is no cheering, no psalms, only tired feet on broken stone. You begin to understand the gravity of what you've won. This is not a temporary occupation. This is now a kingdom, and kingdoms demand more than steel. They demand governance. The months that follow are consumed by the slow work of power. You help oversee the allocation of property. Once Muslim houses are divided among knights, churches are restored or built anew atop mosques. The Dome of the Rock is rededicated. Latin bishops replace Eastern patriarchs. Pilgrims begin to arrive. Few at first, in ones and twos. Their faces mirror yours from a year ago. Or confusion, desperation. The new kingdom of Jerusalem is declared. Godfrey rules, but with constant threats to his legitimacy. Raymond of Toulouse refuses to submit fully. Bohemond remains in Antioch, and Baldwin of Boulogne establishes control in Edessa, setting the precedent for other semi-independent Crusader states. These are not united realms. They are shards of Christendom held together by shared danger and fragile ego. You see in fighting, even as Muslim resistance brews. Reports filter in. Skirmishes in Galilee, ambushes near Ramla. Saladin has not yet risen, but the soil is rich with revenge. You spend nights on watchtowers, scanning the horizon for torches that never appear. You help reinforce outposts, build walls, train local militias. Every stone placed is an act of defiance. But in quiet moments you question, was this why you came to patrol foreign cities? To mediate land disputes? To argue with bishops and count grain stores? The glory you sought now tastes like stale bread. You remember Peter the Hermit and his mad sermons. You remember the snow in Anatolia, the poisoned wells of Antioch, the heat of Jerusalem. You remember the friends you buried along the way, and you begin to wonder, was this God's plan or man's ambition dressed in liturgy? The church says it is divine providence. The nobles say it is duty. The poor say nothing. They labor in silence, rebuilding what the siege destroyed. You join them when you can. It is the only thing that feels real anymore. Winter arrives. It is short but biting. Rain floods the alleys. Disease takes hold in the refugee camps. Godfrey himself falls ill, and though he clings to life through the season, the strength behind his eyes begins to fade. In the spring of 1100, pilgrims continue to trickle in. You meet some of them near Jaffa. They speak of miracles, of relics, of your triumph, but you see the disbelief when they reach the city. They expected Jerusalem to shine like heaven. Instead, it groans like a hospital. Still, you guide them. You tell them the stories. You show them the sepulchre, the mount, the garden. You offer them water and bread, what little you have. And when they leave, they thank you. Some weep, not for sorrow, for awe. You realize then that something sacred has survived, not in marble or gold, but in the persistence of those who believe. The kingdom may be brittle, the politics poisoned, but faith somehow remains, and so do you. Though the road ahead is longer still, you walk it with eyes open, because this is no longer a crusade. It is your home, and your fight has only just begun. Chapter 6. The Rising Storm. Saladin and the Muslim Resurgence. 1100–1187. You have settled into the Kingdom of Jerusalem, but peace is a fragile thing, like glass balanced on a blade. The dust of battle still coats your boots, but already rumors stir in the desert winds. The lands beyond your walls simmer with unrest. You sense it before the first arrow is shot. The Crusader hold is precarious, a fragile thread stretched thin across hostile lands. This is the time when legends are born, and when the fate of an entire region begins to shift. You remember the stories of Saladin, the man destined to change everything. His name is whispered in the bazaars of Damascus and the mosques of Cairo, carried on the lips of warriors and common folk alike. To you, he is more than a man. He is a force, a rising storm destined to sweep across the Levant and challenge the very existence of the Crusader states. Saladin, Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, was not born a king nor a sultan. He was a Kurd, raised in the courts of Damascus, trained in the art of war and diplomacy, a man of faith who wielded his sword with the precision of a scholar and the fury of a lion. You hear how he unites fractured Muslim factions, a man who understands that only together can they face the Crusader threat. The divided emirs and sultans have long bickered, their quarrels weakening the lands that once thrived under the great caliphates. Saladin's vision is clear: a unified front, a revival of Islamic strength, and the recovery of Jerusalem. You watch the news spread across the lands. In 1174, Saladin ascends as Sultan of Egypt, consolidating power with unmatched skill. He strengthens armies, reforms administration, and builds alliances, not just with Muslim rulers, but also with the Bedouins and other desert tribes who respect strength and honor. You realize that the balance of power is shifting. The kingdom of Jerusalem is no longer the unstoppable force it once seemed. It is a fragile fortress, surrounded by lands growing stronger and hungrier. The Muslims do not forget their losses. They remember the siege, the massacre, the desecration. Their faith fuels their resolve. You hear tales of how Saladin honors his soldiers, rewards bravery, but also respects his enemies. Unlike the Crusaders, who fought often divided and jealous, Saladin works with his allies, using diplomacy and faith in equal measure. Yet you cannot deny his ruthlessness. His campaigns are relentless. Town after town falls to his armies. You see the banners of the kingdom retreating, their colors fading beneath the desert sun. The Franks hold their ground, but their numbers dwindle, their resolve weakens. They watch as key strongholds like Edessa and Tripoli become battlegrounds or fall entirely. You are no stranger to battle yourself. You have fought across the Holy Land from Antioch to Jerusalem, but now you find yourself fighting shadows, the creeping threat of a man whose name carries the weight of destiny. The year 1187 arrives and the storm breaks. Saladin gathers a massive army, a force said to number tens of thousands, at the city of Tiberias. The air is thick with tension and sweat. You stand alongside King Guy of Lusignan, whose command has been questioned and ridiculed. His army is tired, outnumbered, but duty binds you. You ride toward the battlefield, your heart pounding as the enemy's dust cloud looms on the horizon. The Battle of Hattin is not just a fight, it is a cataclysm. The sun scorches the dry hills, water is scarce, and the heat saps your strength. Your horses falter. Your comrades grow desperate. Saladin's forces surround you, cutting off access to water. You see knights fall from exhaustion, weapons slip from numb hands, hope draining with each labored breath. The clash is brutal. The Franks fight with desperation, but Saladin's forces are relentless, coordinated, merciless. You witness the shattering of the Crusader army. The true cross carried into battle as a holy relic is captured. Your leaders are taken prisoner. The army you fought with, bled with, dies or surrenders. You survive the carnage, but the price is immense. Jerusalem itself stands vulnerable, its defenders broken. You know what is coming. Saladin does not delay. His army marches on Jerusalem. The city, so hard won by your brethren decades before, now faces a siege from an enemy who commands not only strength, but the hearts of many. The siege is merciful in a way you cannot understand. Saladin offers terms to the inhabitants. Those who cannot pay ransom are allowed to leave. The city is spared wholesale slaughter. You hear of the surrender, the prayers offered in both mosques and churches, the flags changing hands. Jerusalem falls again. You walk its streets, now under new rule. The air tastes different, heavier with history and sorrow. The dome of the rock gleams under the sun, untouched, restored to its former glory. And you wonder, what did all this fighting mean? Who truly wins when faith is wielded as a weapon? The Crusader states shrink, their presence reduced to scattered enclaves surrounded by hostile lands. The dream of a Christian kingdom in the East fades into legend. You watch as new leaders rise, new crusades are preached in Europe, promising salvation and vengeance. But you know better. You have seen the cost, the blood, the faith, the shattered lives. And you realize that the Crusades are not a simple story of good versus evil. They are a tapestry woven with ambition, piety, power, and despair. As the sun sets over the Holy Land, you feel the weight of history on your shoulders. The storm has passed, but the winds will rise again, because faith is eternal, and so is the conflict it ignites. Chapter 7, The Aftermath of the Third Crusade, A Kingdom Without a Crown, Expanded Edition. You find yourself in the turbulent wake of the Third Crusade's uneasy conclusion. It is the year 1192, and the Holy Land, though still bleeding from years of conflict, has settled into a fragile, negotiated peace. But for you, standing amidst the dust of Acre's battered walls, the hopes of Jerusalem still distant, peace feels hollow. The crusade had promised glory, deliverance, and victory. Instead, it has yielded exhaustion, compromise, and uncertainty. Richard, the Lionheart, from hero to captive. As Richard the Lionheart boards a ship for home, his thoughts are as burdened as his armor. Though hailed in Europe as a chivalric hero, Richard leaves the Holy Land with a sense of unfinished business. He had fought with unmatched ferocity and brilliance, from the storming of Acre to the stand at Arsuf to the final recapture of Jaffa. Yet the holy city remains in Muslim hands. You sense the bittersweet taste of the campaign in Richard's eyes as he gazes westward. His enemies abroad are fewer than his enemies at home. The Lionheart knows that King Philip of France, his former ally, plots against his holdings while he is absent. With urgency he departs, but fate intervenes. Richard is shipwrecked and captured, near Vienna by Duke Leopold of Austria, a man Richard had insulted during the siege of Acre. The King of England is now a prisoner, and all of Europe is shaken. A staggering ransom is demanded, 150,000 marks, nearly twice England's annual income. You feel the burden shift from crown to peasantry as taxes rise to buy back the king. Saladin's final year, the Sultan's burden in Damascus. Saladin, too, is a man transformed. The crusade has aged him. Though victorious in holding Jerusalem, he has spent the full force of his empire's resources. His soldiers are weary, his treasury depleted. He rules a coalition of emirs and tribal leaders, bound to him by personal Loyalty and fear. You walk the streets of Damascus and hear whispers of reverence and doubt. Some blame Saladin for allowing Richard to leave the Holy Land alive. Others see in him the model of the perfect Muslim ruler, generous, brave, and devout. But even the greatest warrior must bow to time. Saladin dies in March 1193, leaving only a few coins and a reputation that will live for centuries. His empire fractures within months of his death. Sons and nephews squabble over inheritance. The great tide of Islamic unity that once surged behind the green banners of jihad begins to ebb. Europe's shifting power. The rise of new crusading powers. Back in Europe, the Crusades' impact is more psychological than territorial. While Richard is still hailed as a hero in ballads and courtly tales, the stark truth is unavoidable. Jerusalem remains lost. Pilgrims may travel freely, yes, but the dream of a triumphant Christian East has faltered. You see this disillusionment reflected in the fragmented politics of Europe. The papacy, while claiming moral leadership, is weakened by the divisions among the monarchs. The Holy Roman Empire is paralyzed by succession disputes following Frederick Barbarossa's death. France grows stronger under Philip II, who returns, home to consolidate his grip over Normandy and Brittany. England is left to reel from both financial exhaustion and the absence of its king. Prince John, Richard's younger brother, begins to maneuver for power, sowing seeds of discord that will erupt in future conflicts. Crusader states, fractured and vulnerable. The Crusader states, Antioch, Tripoli, and the newly fortified coastal, stripped from Tyre to Jaffa, remain as thin Christian outposts in a Muslim-dominated land. You feel their precariousness. Every caravan must be guarded, every city reinforced, every truce carefully observed. The truce between Richard and Saladin has brought peace, but not security. Garrisons are undermanned, supplies are scarce, and new threats loom, not only from Muslim powers to the east, but from internal rivalries. The Knights Templar and Hospitallers grow in influence, acting more like sovereign powers than monastic orders. Yet amid the tensions, you also feel a curious calm. There is trade between Christian ports and Muslim cities. There are even friendships and mutual respect between former foes. For the first time in nearly a century, the Holy Land is not solely a battlefield, it is a crossroads. Memory and myth, the crusade in story and song. You return to Europe with stories. You listen to minstrels sing of Richard the Lionheart battling, Saracens alone, slaying hundreds with his mighty sword. You hear of Saladin's honor, of his charity to captives, and his refusal to massacre civilians. The reality of war becomes wrapped in a mantle of legend. In time, these stories will become more powerful than the history itself. They will inspire new generations to take up the cross, some driven by faith, others by ambition or greed. You realize the Third Crusade was not an end, but a pivot. It redefined the narrative of holy war as a contest between noble kings, pious champions, and an enemy worthy of admiration. Reflection. An unfinished crusade. You look back on the Third Crusade and see a campaign that was both a triumph and a failure. Militarily, it preserved a Christian presence in the Holy Land. Politically, it demonstrated the limits of Crusader unity. Spiritually, it rekindled devotion, but also introduced doubt. Most of all, you see that this crusade was not just about lands or relics, it was about identity. Christian and Muslim leaders defined themselves through this struggle. Cultures were shaped, heroes were made, and wounds, both literal and spiritual, were carved deep. The dream of a unified Christendom reclaiming Jerusalem was still alive, but dimmer. And in the East, a new generation was preparing for what would come next. You walk away from this chapter not with certainty, but with the sobering knowledge that faith, honor, and power are rarely aligned, and that history, like crusade, is always unfinished. Chapter 8. Seeds of the Fourth Crusade. A pledge to the cross, a path to Venice. You stand in the twilight of the 12th century, a world still reeling from the bitter fruits of the Third Crusade. Jerusalem, the eternal city, remains in Muslim hands, though the mighty Saladin has passed away. The Holy Land is bruised, not broken. In castles and cathedrals from Burgundy to Bavaria, crusading fever still simmers in the blood of men, but it needs a voice, a shepherd, to stir it back to flame. That voice comes in 1198, ringing out from the heart of Rome. Pope Innocent III, youthful and uncompromising, ascends the papal throne at age 37. You watch him speak from the Lateran Palace, not merely as a spiritual father, but as a sovereign visionary. His eyes blaze not only with piety, but with purpose. His message is clear. The crusade must be reborn. Deus. Vult, he proclaims, invoking the cry of the First Crusade. He sends letters far and wide invoking guilt, glory, and the promise of absolution. This crusade will not belong to kings like Richard or Frederick, but to a new generation of noblemen loyal to the cross and to Rome. The Council at Ypres, a new breed of crusaders. Your journey leads you north to the town of Ypres in 1199 to the court of Count Thibaut III of Champagne. A grand tournament is underway, and amid the clamor of steel and cheers of the crowd, papal legates arrive with a sacred proposition. There in the great hall, beneath fluttering banners and candlelit vaults, a new crusade is proclaimed. Among the knights is a tall, resolute nobleman, Boniface of Montferrat. His family has long ties to the Holy Land. Boniface steps forward. One by one, others follow. Swords are raised, crosses stitched to cloaks, oaths are spoken before the altar. You feel a strange blend of hope and tension. These knights are idealistic, but they are not kings. They lack the wealth, the ships, the power of their royal predecessors, and that will matter more than anyone realizes. The bargain with Venice. How do you move an army without a fleet? You cross the Alps with the Crusaders' emissaries to the shimmering lagoons of Venice, a republic built on trade, cunning, and ambition. The city is a marvel. Its palaces rise from the sea, its piazzas bustle with merchants from 3 continents. You enter the Doge's palace, where the blind aged Enrico Dandolo rules with a mind as sharp as any general's blade. The Crusaders ask for ships. The Doge listens. Then a daring agreement is struck. Venice will build and man a fleet to carry more than 30,000 men to Egypt, the new gateway to Jerusalem, for a colossal fee of 85,000 silver marks. The Crusaders agree, setting a rendezvous for the summer of 1202. But the plan begins to falter almost immediately. When you arrive in Venice that summer, only around 12,000 Crusaders show up. Many have taken other routes, others never came. The treasure chests are nearly empty. The contract is binding, but the Crusaders are broke. The Venetians, unwilling to forfeit their profit, offer an alternative. Join us in capturing Zara, a rebellious Christian city on the Dalmatian coast. In return, we forgive your debt. The proposition horrifies you. Attacking fellow Christians, but the Crusaders are trapped. Hungry, idle, and indebted, they agree. Zara falls in blood and fire. The Pope excommunicates everyone involved. You realize the crusade has already gone astray. The arrival of a Byzantine prince, as winter falls in Zara, a stranger arrives, Prince Alexios Angelos, son of the deposed Byzantine Emperor Isaac II. Alexios is desperate and persuasive. He offers a new deal. Help me reclaim Constantinople, and I will repay your debts, provide 10,000 soldiers, and fund your journey to Jerusalem. It is an alluring promise. You debate with yourself and with others. Should the crusade become a political, mercenary force? Some say yes, Alexios's offer could revive the campaign. Others warn of disaster, but the die is cast. The fleet sails east. For the first time in history, a crusade will not head toward Muslim territory, but toward Constantinople, the capital of Eastern Christianity. The first siege of Constantinople, you arrive in the Bosporus in summer 1203. Constantinople is breathtaking. Towering walls, endless domes, marble streets. Yet within, the ruling emperor Alexios III is weak and unloved. The Crusaders and Venetians launch an assault. The Byzantines resist feebly. By July, the city falls, and Alexios IV, the prince in exile, is placed on the throne alongside his restored father. But Alexios IV cannot fulfill his promises. The treasury is drained. To raise funds, he imposes heavy taxes and attempts to plunder the city's churches, alienating his people and enraging the clergy. Resentment boils. Riots erupt. In early 1204, Alexios IV is overthrown and murdered. The throne passes to a usurper, Alexios V Doukas, a hardened general. The Crusaders, furious at betrayal and unpaid, decide on a terrible course. They will conquer Constantinople themselves. The sack of Constantinople on April 12, 1204, you witness a nightmare. The Crusaders launch a second assault, this time not as liberators but as conquerors. The walls are breached and Constantinople is consumed in flames. What follows is 3 days of horror. Churches are looted, nuns are raped, relics are desecrated. Priceless manuscripts are torched, icons are smashed. The Hagia Sophia is defiled by drunken soldiers. You walk through bloodied streets, past burning libraries and weeping monks. No one is spared, not women, not children, not the elderly. This is no longer a crusade. It is vengeance, greed, madness. In the ruins, the victors declare a Latin empire. Western barons carve up the Eastern Roman Empire. The Doge of Venice and Boniface of Montferrat divide provinces like merchants haggling over spice. The dream dies. The Pope, upon hearing of the sack, is appalled, but he cannot undo what has been done. The schism between Catholic and Orthodox deepens into a wound that will fester for centuries. You look back at where it all began, the pulpits of Rome, the oaths at Acre, the dreams of Jerusalem. What remains? A stolen city, a disgraced cause. The Fourth Crusade never reached the Holy Land. It never fought Saladin's heirs. Instead, it devoured one of the greatest Christian cities ever built, and in that moment, the very soul of the crusading movement was lost. Chapter 9. The Lost Kingdoms, Fractures and Alliances, 1192 to 1229. You have crossed the burning deserts and scaled the ancient walls of cities, only to find that the land itself is fractured, more so than the armies that once marched under the banner of the cross. The fervor of the First and Third Crusades has waned, and what remains is a patchwork of fragile kingdoms, each struggling to survive amid enemies seen and unseen. The aftermath of the Third Crusade, when Richard the Lionheart withdrew from the Holy Land in 1192, he left behind a realm diminished, held together by threadbare alliances and battered by the constant threat of reconquest. You stand among the remnants of that dream, the Kingdom of Jerusalem reduced to a shadow, holding only the coastal city of Acre and a handful of strongholds. King Guy of Lusignan, once the proud claimant of Jerusalem, now finds himself king in name more than in power. His leadership is questioned not just by his enemies but by his own nobles. You hear the murmurs of discontent at court, where every man measures the worth of the king against the losses they have suffered. Guy's inability to hold Jerusalem in 1187 haunts him, and his rule is a delicate balancing act between survival and pride. Yet, it is not only the loss of land that threatens the Crusader states, but the divisions within. The noble houses, each with their own claims and grievances, watch one another with wary eyes. Alliances are forged out of necessity, but the bonds are fragile, easily broken by jealousy or ambition. The Principality of Antioch. A kingdom at the crossroads traveling north, you come to the Principality of Antioch, a jewel of the Crusader states, but also a cauldron of political intrigue. Constance, the widow of Bohemond III, rules with an iron will, yet her position is anything but secure. She contends with internal nobles, seeking greater autonomy and external threats that loom like dark clouds on the horizon. Antioch's importance is undeniable. It commands the gateway between the Mediterranean and the East, a crossroads of culture and commerce. Yet, its power is waning. You see how Constance navigates a perilous game, courting alliances with both the Crusaders and Muslim leaders when it suits her. You understand that survival here demands more than valor in battle. It demands cunning and ruthlessness. The shifting power of the Ayyubid dynasty. Across the contested lands, the legacy of Saladin remains strong, but increasingly challenged. His death in 1193 left a vacuum that his successors scramble to fill. You witness the fracturing of the Ayyubid dynasty as Saladin's sons and relatives carve out their own emirates, each striving for dominance. This new dynamic complicates the political landscape. The unity Saladin forged through war is now replaced by rivalries and competition. You meet princes who are more concerned with consolidating their power than with waging holy war against the Crusaders. Still, the spirit of resistance against the Crusaders remains strong. Despite their internal disputes, the Muslim leaders understand the importance of maintaining control over key cities like Damascus, Cairo, and Jerusalem. Each emir's court buzzes with diplomatic envoys, spies, and secret deals. The land is a chessboard, and every move carries deadly consequences. The rise of the Mamluks, from slaves to sovereigns, you have heard whispers of a new power rising in Egypt, the Mamluks. Once slaves brought to serve as soldiers, their discipline and loyalty have transformed them into a formidable military caste. They have begun to assert control over Egypt, laying the groundwork for a dynasty that will one day crush the Crusader states and the Ayyubid factions alike. Watching their rise, you feel the weight of history shifting beneath your feet. The Mamluks are not just warriors. They are architects of a new order, ruthless and unyielding. Their loyalty lies not in bloodlines, but in their own code of honor and discipline. They will not be easily swayed or defeated. Diplomacy and truces. A fragile peace in this chaotic landscape. War is not the only means of survival. You witness a series of treaties and truces that offer fleeting moments of peace. The Treaty of Jaffa in 1192 stands out, a rare agreement between Richard the Lionheart and Saladin that grants Christian pilgrims access to Jerusalem even though the city remains under Muslim control. This treaty, fragile and temporary, breathes a sigh of relief across the region. For the first time in years, merchants move with relative freedom, and travelers traverse lands that once seemed permanently closed. Yet, the treaty is a patchwork solution, held together by mutual exhaustion rather than trust. You see how both sides use diplomacy as a weapon. Envoys carry secret messages, and behind the smiles of negotiation lie plots and schemes. Every truce is a pause in an unending war, and you know it will not last forever. The fractured Crusader states, political struggles and survival back within the Crusader realms, you observe the delicate balancing act that rulers must perform. They face constant threats not only from external enemies, but also from internal dissent. In the Kingdom of Jerusalem's reduced territories, nobles debate fiercely over how to rebuild their strength. The Order of the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller gain influence, becoming both military powerhouses and political actors. You watch as they negotiate land, wealth, and authority, often clashing with secular rulers. The city of Acre becomes the new capital, a melting pot of cultures, merchants, soldiers, and pilgrims. Here, you hear tales of intrigue and betrayal, alliances formed in taverns and war councils alike. The role of religion, faith as a unifying and dividing force. Throughout this turmoil, faith remains both a beacon and a weapon. The church exerts tremendous influence, often pressuring leaders to act in ways that serve spiritual goals rather than political pragmatism. You see how the Pope's calls for new crusades echo across Europe, urging knights and nobles to take up the cross again. Yet many crusaders are reluctant or distracted by conflicts closer to home. Within the Crusader states, religious fervor motivates some, but others grow weary, disillusioned by the endless bloodshed. Meanwhile, the Muslim rulers invoke their own religious legitimacy, rallying their people with sermons that speak of jihad and divine justice. You realize that faith, so central to the Crusades, is also a source of division between Christians and Muslims, but also within each group. The dawn of new crusades. As you stand amid these fragile kingdoms, you sense the looming shadow of new crusades. The Fourth Crusade, launched in 1202, unfolds with unexpected consequences. Diverted away from the Holy Land and towards Constantinople, where Latin crusaders sack the Christian Byzantine capital in 1204. You witness how this betrayal deepens the rift between Eastern and Western Christendom, weakening the possibility of a united front against Muslim powers. The Crusaders' actions sow distrust and chaos, further complicating an already volatile situation. The consequences of this detour echo across the decades. Byzantine power wanes, and the fractured Crusader states struggle without the hope of Eastern support. The rise of new leaders and the changing face of power, you observe the emergence of new leaders who attempt to navigate this treacherous terrain. Among them, Frederick II, Holy Roman Emperor, whose ambitions to claim Jerusalem through diplomacy rather than warfare mark a new chapter in crusading history. His eventual expedition in 1228-1229 results in a controversial treaty that briefly restores Jerusalem to Christian control, but at a cost. You see how his methods provoke resentment among the nobility and clergy, some of whom view his actions as pragmatic, others as betrayal. Meanwhile, you watch as Muslim leaders continue to adapt, their tactics evolving with the times. The balance of power shifts like sand, uncertain and unpredictable. The legacy of the lost kingdoms. This chapter closes. You feel the weight of history pressing upon you. The lost kingdoms are more than just shattered realms. They are the remnants of a dream fueled by faith, ambition, and blood. They are a testament to human resilience and folly, to the complex interplay of belief and power. You stand witness to a world where every alliance carries risk, every victory is temporary, and the future remains uncertain. The story of the Crusades is no longer just a tale of battles and sieges, but a saga of survival, diplomacy, and the unending struggle to define what it means to belong to a faith, a land, a cause. And though these kingdoms are lost, their echoes continue to shape the destiny of East and West alike. Chapter 10. The Final Twilight, the Fall and Legacy of the Crusader States. You arrive at the precipice of an era, the final twilight of the Crusader States, where centuries of conflict, faith, and ambition reach their harrowing conclusion. This chapter is not merely the story of a military defeat or the loss of territory. It is a profound saga of endurance, hope, and the inexorable forces of history that shape the fate of civilizations. The waning strength of the Crusader states as the 13th century dawns. You see the Crusader states standing precariously on the edge of oblivion. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, once a mighty realm ruled from the city of David, has shrunk to a few scattered enclaves along the Levantine coast, with Acre as their last bastion. The once proud banners of the Latin kings flutter weakly in the salty sea breeze. The Crusaders' military power has diminished drastically. Their forces are no longer the mighty armies that surged forth from Europe. Instead, they rely heavily on the orders, the Knights Templar, the Hospitallers, and the Teutonic Knights, whose discipline and martial prowess provide the remaining shield for these fragile states. You walk the narrow streets of Acre, a city teeming with merchants, pilgrims, soldiers, and spies. The city's walls bear the scars of countless sieges and skirmishes. The marketplace buzzes with traders from all corners of the Mediterranean and beyond, Venetians, Genoese, Syrians, Armenians, all bound by commerce despite the looming threat of war. But beneath this vibrant facade lies a palpable tension. The noble families squabble over lands and titles, the church presses its demands, and the common people grow weary of endless conflict and uncertainty. The rise of the Mamluk Sultanate. Far to the south, you witness the ascendance of a new and terrifying power, the Mamluk Sultanate. The Mamluks, born from the ranks of former slave soldiers, have seized control of Egypt and Syria with unparalleled military skill and political acumen. Under Sultan Baybars, who rises to power in 1260, the Mamluks prove themselves a force unlike any before them. Baybars is a master strategist, charismatic leader, and ruthless warrior. You observe how he consolidates power, reforms the army, and unites the disparate Muslim factions under his banner. Baybars' campaigns are relentless. He strikes with precision, retaking cities lost to the Crusaders and defeating Mongol invaders who threaten the Islamic world from the east. His forces are disciplined, mobile, and deeply motivated by religious zeal and a desire to expel the Latin occupiers. You feel the unstoppable momentum building. The Mamluks' vision is clear: to end the Crusader presence in the Holy Land once and for all. The siege and fall of Acre, 1291. Your heart pounds as you stand on the battered walls of Acre in 1291. the final fortress of the Crusader states. The city is surrounded by the vast armies of Sultan al-Ashraf Khalil, Baybar's successor, who commands a formidable force equipped with siege engines, archers, and heavy cavalry. The siege is brutal and protracted. Days and nights blur together, under the thunder of catapults and the cries of the wounded. Defenders fight desperately, knowing that if Acre falls, the last Christian foothold in the Holy Land will be lost. You witness acts of extraordinary courage and tragic sacrifice. Knights and foot soldiers stand shoulder to shoulder, repelling wave after wave of attackers. Civilians huddle in churches and basements, praying and tending to the wounded. Despite their valor, the defenders cannot hold forever. The city's walls crumble, and the Mamluks breach the defenses. A final chaotic battle erupts within the streets. You hear the clash of swords, the shouts of commanders, the wails of the dying. When the dust settles, Acre is no more a Crusader city. Its fall marks the end of an era. The Crusader presence in the Holy Land has come to a definitive close. The exodus and diaspora of the Crusaders. In the aftermath, you follow the scattered remnants of the Crusader nobility, knights, and civilians. As they flee westward, some find refuge in Cyprus, others in European courts or the Kingdom of Armenia. The once vast network of Crusader states dissolves into memory and legend. You sense the deep sorrow and bitterness among those who survive. Their dream of a Christian kingdom in the East has crumbled, but their faith remains unbroken. Many vow to continue the struggle by other means, through diplomacy, piety, or by supporting future crusades. You also observe how the Crusader legacy lives on in the cultural exchanges that occurred during their centuries of presence. Architecture, knowledge, trade routes, and even culinary influences blend East and West in unexpected ways, planting seeds for future interactions between civilizations. The impact on Europe and the Islamic world. The fall of the Crusader states sends shockwaves throughout Europe. You feel the complex mixture of relief, disappointment, and reflection. The papacy calls for new crusades, but enthusiasm wanes as political priorities shift and the horrors of earlier campaigns remain fresh, in memory. In Europe, the Crusades leave an indelible mark on the medieval imagination, inspiring stories, art, and literature. The idea of the Holy Land as a sacred battleground continues to captivate minds and hearts for centuries. Meanwhile, in the Islamic world, the Mamluk victory bolsters Muslim unity and pride. The Sultanate strengthens its hold over the Levant and Egypt, becoming a dominant power for the next 2 centuries. The end of an era, the beginning of another. As you look back on the centuries of conflict, you realize the Crusades were not merely wars over land. They were a clash of cultures, religions, and ideas, a turbulent encounter that shaped the medieval world in profound ways. Though the Crusader states have vanished, their legacy persists in the ongoing dialogue, sometimes violent, sometimes peaceful, between East and West. The cities they built, the roads they traveled, and the stories they left behind continue to echo through history. You understand that history does not end with the fall of Acre. It is a continuum, where the past informs the future, and where every ending is also a beginning. The Crusades, with all their complexity and contradiction, remain a powerful chapter in the story of humanity, a testament to the enduring struggles over faith, power, and identity.